27 doctors failed to save the millionaire. Then the maid surprisingly steps in and instantly heals him. He was dying, and nobody knew why. $47 million in the bank. The best doctor's money could buy. And Robert Mitchell was slipping away while 27 specialists stood helplessly around his hospital bed, watching their patients' organs shut down one by one. In 12 hours, he would be dead. But at 3:17 a.m., a cleaning lady walked into room 312 and saw something that would expose the terrifying truth about American healthcare. What she discovered didn't just save his life, it revealed that our most trusted medical institutions have been killing patients for decades, and they don't even know it. Before we continue deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. What I'm about to tell you is a true story that exposes the fragility of our healthcare system and reveals how sometimes the most profound medical breakthroughs come from the most unexpected places. This is the story of how a hospital cleaning lady named Maria Santos saved a man's life when an army of Harvard-educated physicians had given up hope, and what her discovery means for every single person who will ever set foot in a hospital. Robert Mitchell was everything you'd expect from a Silicon Valley success story. At 52, he had built 3 companies from the ground up, employed over 800 people, and was worth approximately $47 million. He worked 16-hour days, survived on energy drinks and determination, and hadn't taken a real vacation in over 6 years. His wife Sarah had been begging him to slow down, to see a doctor about the persistent headaches and the way his hands had started trembling during important meetings. Robert always promised he would, after the next product launch, after the next board meeting, after the next acquisition deal. There was always something more important than his health, until the morning when his body decided it had waited long enough. The collapse happened during a routine investor presentation in his downtown San Francisco office. One moment Robert was explaining quarterly projections. The next he was convulsing on the conference room floor while his assistant frantically called 911. The paramedics found him unresponsive with a core body temperature of 104 degrees, his pulse racing at 180 beats per minute, and blood pressure readings that made no medical sense. They rushed him to Metropolitan General, one of the most prestigious hospitals on the West Coast, where a team of emergency physicians immediately went to work trying to stabilize a patient whose symptoms seemed to contradict everything they knew about human physiology. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the chief of emergency medicine, had seen thousands of cases during her 23-year career, but Robert Mitchell's presentation was unlike anything in her experience. His blood work showed massive inflammation throughout his body, yet there were no signs of infection. His brain scans revealed significant swelling, but no evidence of stroke or trauma. His liver and kidney functions were deteriorating rapidly, but toxicology screens came back completely normal. Within hours, specialists from neurology, cardiology, infectious disease, and internal medicine had joined the case, each bringing their expertise to bear on a medical puzzle that seemed to have no solution. Dr. James Thornton, the hospital's leading neurologist, suspected some form of rare autoimmune encephalitis and immediately started Robert on high-dose steroids and immunosuppressive therapy. Dr. Rachel Kim from infectious disease was convinced they were dealing with an exotic pathogen and began a broad spectrum of antibiotics while ordering tests for everything from meningitis to rare tropical diseases. The cardiologist, Dr. Michael Rodriguez, focused on the heart rhythm abnormalities and prescribed medications to control the dangerous arrhythmias that kept triggering throughout the night. Each specialist was treating their piece of the puzzle, but the patient continued to deteriorate despite their combined efforts. By the second day, Robert's condition had become critical. His organs were beginning to shut down in a cascade of failure that the medical team couldn't stop or even slow. His wife Sarah had flown in from their home in Palo Alto and was keeping vigil beside his bed, watching helplessly as machines breathed for her husband and pumped medications into his system that seemed to be having no effect. The doctors spoke in hushed tones about experimental treatments and contacted colleagues at Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, and Cleveland Clinic, desperately seeking insights from some of the best medical minds in the country. Every consultation ended the same way, with more questions than answers, and a growing sense that they were running out of time. That's when Maria Santos entered the picture, though none of the medical team paid any attention to the 54-year-old woman who quietly went about her work cleaning the intensive care unit during the overnight shift. Maria had been working at Metropolitan General for 8 years, arriving every evening at 11 p.m. and methodically making her way through each room, emptying trash cans, mopping floors, and sanitizing surfaces. She was practically invisible to most of the staff, just another member of the hospital support team who kept the facility running while the real medical work happened around her. But Maria had been watching Robert Mitchell's case unfold with growing concern, and she was beginning to see something that the specialists had missed. You see, Maria Santos wasn't just a cleaning lady. Before immigrating to the United States 12 years earlier, she had been a registered nurse in her native Philippines, with 15 years of experience in rural hospitals where doctors were scarce and nurses had to make life or death decisions with limited resources. She had seen patients with symptoms like Robert's before, in villages where industrial pollution and contaminated water sources created health crises that never made it into American medical textbooks. The trembling hands, the unexplained inflammation, the organ failure that seemed to come from nowhere, these were all signs she recognized from her work, treating patients who had been exposed to heavy metal poisoning. The problem was that Maria's nursing credentials weren't recognized in the United States, and the cost of going back to school to retake her licensing exams was beyond her financial means as a single mother supporting 3 children. So she had taken the only hospital job she could find, cleaning rooms and watching from the sidelines as medical cases unfolded before her trained eyes. She had learned to keep her observations to herself after an incident 2 years earlier, when she had tried to suggest a diagnosis to a resident physician and been told in no uncertain terms that cleaning staff should stick to cleaning and leave the medicine to the doctors. But watching Robert Mitchell's family keeping their vigil, seeing the desperation in his wife's eyes and the growing helplessness of the medical team, Maria found herself unable to stay silent. On the 3rd night of Robert's hospitalization, as she was cleaning his room while Sarah dozed in the bedside chair, Maria noticed something that made her blood run cold. The patient's fingernails, which she had observed each night, were developing a distinctive blue-black discoloration along the nail beds. It was subtle, barely visible unless you knew what to look for, but to Maria's trained eye, it was unmistakable. She had seen this exact presentation in patients back home who had been slowly poisoned by lead contamination in their water supply. Maria spent the rest of her shift wrestling with what to do. She knew that suggesting a diagnosis was far outside her role as a cleaning lady, and that most of the doctors would dismiss her observations without a second thought. But she also knew that if she was right about the lead poisoning, Robert Mitchell would be dead within days without proper treatment, and the current medical approach was actually making him worse. The steroids and immunosuppressive drugs that Dr. Thornton had prescribed would prevent the patient's body from fighting off the toxic effects of the metal, accelerating his decline rather than stopping it. At 5:30 a.m., as her shift was ending and the day staff was beginning to arrive, Maria made a decision that would change everything. She approached Dr. Harper, who was starting her morning rounds, and respectfully asked if she could have a moment to discuss something she had observed about the patient in room 312. Dr. Harper, exhausted after 3 days of trying to solve an unsolvable case, was initially dismissive, but something in Maria's calm, professional demeanor made her pause and listen. What Maria told her in the next 5 minutes would not only save Robert Mitchell's life, but fundamentally change how the hospital approached difficult diagnostic cases. Maria explained her background as a nurse in the Philippines and described the cases she had seen of heavy metal poisoning in rural communities. She pointed out the nail bed discoloration that none of the specialists had noticed and suggested that they test Robert's blood and urine for lead levels. Dr. Harper was skeptical the patient had no obvious source of lead exposure, and heavy metal poisoning was extremely rare in their patient population. But something about Maria's quiet confidence and detailed knowledge convinced her to order the tests. The results came back 6 hours later and confirmed what Maria had suspected. Robert Mitchell's lead levels were more than 15 times the normal range, indicating massive acute poisoning that had been attacking his nervous system and organs for weeks. The source, they would later discover, was contaminated water from antique lead pipes in Robert's century-old office building, pipes that had been gradually leaching toxic levels of the metal into the building's water supply. Robert had been drinking this contaminated water every day for over 2 years, and the recent stress of a major business deal had apparently triggered the acute crisis that brought him to the hospital. Once they knew what they were dealing with, the treatment was straightforward. Dr. Harper immediately stopped all the medications that had been suppressing Robert's immune system and began chelation therapy to remove the lead from his bloodstream. Within 12 hours, his vital signs began to stabilize. Within 24 hours, he was conscious and responsive. Within a week, he was well enough to go home, though it would take months of continued treatment and therapy to fully recover from the damage the poisoning had caused. The story of Robert Mitchell's recovery spread quickly through Metropolitan General, but it raised uncomfortable questions about how 27 specialists had missed a diagnosis that a cleaning lady had spotted in 3 days. The hospital's administration was faced with the reality that one of their most experienced nurses was working as custodial staff because of bureaucratic barriers that prevented foreign-trained medical professionals from practicing their profession. They were also forced to confront the fact that their diagnostic process, for all its sophistication and technology, had failed to consider possibilities outside their usual experience. Dr. Harper became Maria's champion, working with the hospital administration to create a program that would help foreign-trained healthcare workers like Maria get back into clinical practice. The hospital agreed to pay for Maria's licensing exams and provide her with a position as a nurse practitioner once she completed the required certifications. More importantly, they established a protocol that encouraged input from all staff members, regardless of their official role, when dealing with difficult diagnostic cases. Robert Mitchell recovered completely and returned to work 6 months later, but the experience had changed him profoundly. He established a foundation dedicated to studying environmental health hazards in urban areas and funding programs to help foreign-trained medical professionals practice in the United States. He also became an advocate for patients' rights to seek second opinions and question their medical care, having learned firsthand how easy it is for even the best doctors to miss important clues. The case became a teaching example at medical schools across the country, illustrating how diagnostic bias and systemic barriers can prevent life-saving information from reaching the patients who need it most. It also highlighted the wealth of medical knowledge and experience that immigrants bring to American healthcare, knowledge that too often goes unrecognized and unused because of licensing requirements and cultural barriers. Maria Santos completed her nursing recertification 18 months later, and now works as a nurse practitioner in Metropolitan General's emergency department, where her unique background and diagnostic skills have helped solve dozens of difficult cases. She has become a sought-after speaker at medical conferences, sharing her story and advocating for more inclusive approaches to healthcare that value diverse perspectives and experiences. The lead contamination in Robert's office building was found to affect 17 other businesses in the same complex, leading to a major environmental remediation effort and new regulations for testing older buildings. The case also prompted other hospitals to review their diagnostic protocols and look for ways to better utilize the knowledge and experience of their entire staff, not just their physicians and nurses. But perhaps the most important lesson from Robert Mitchell's case is how easily life and death medical situations can hinge on unexpected factors. If Maria Santos had not been working that night shift, if she had not had the courage to speak up despite her position as a cleaning lady, if Dr. Harper had not been willing to listen to an unconventional suggestion, Robert would almost certainly have died from a completely treatable condition. His case reminds us that medical knowledge exists in many forms, and that sometimes the most important insights come from the most unlikely sources. Today, Robert Mitchell is healthy and thriving, running his companies with a new appreciation for work-life balance and environmental health. Maria Santos has saved countless other lives in her role as a nurse practitioner, bringing her unique perspective and experience to bear on difficult cases every day. Their story stands as a testament to the power of listening, the importance of diverse perspectives in healthcare, and the remarkable things that can happen when we value knowledge and experience wherever we find it. The next time you're in a hospital, remember that healing can come from unexpected places, and that sometimes the person who saves your life might be someone you'd never expect. In a world where medical technology grows more sophisticated every year, Robert Mitchell's case reminds us that the most powerful diagnostic tool we have is still the human mind, trained by experience and sharpened by the willingness to see beyond the obvious. Maria Santos saw what 27 specialists missed, not because she was smarter, but because she brought a different set of experiences and perspectives to the problem. In the end, that difference saved a man's life and changed how an entire hospital approaches the art of healing.